Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's great to see people joining us from literally all over the world. Welcome to the latest in our Innovation at Work webinar series, where today I'm delighted to be joined by Jason Jay, who is a senior lecturer in sustainability and the director, longstanding of our sustainability initiative at the MIT Sloan School of Management. Jason teaches courses on leadership, strategy, and innovation for sustainable business, very broadly defined. As a facilitator and a consultant, he's worked also with industry. He's been an entrepreneur himself, even a kindergarten teacher, as well as a consultant working with a lot of different organizations in the profit and not-for-profit sector. Today, Jason is focusing in on a particular sector or segment of his work on sustainability in talking about owning impact, particularly thinking about how do family-owned businesses and enterprises operate in the space of sustainability. So today, Jason is going to talk to us really about how comprehensive social impact strategies can combine capital deployment, philanthropy, and corporate governance, and all the different elements that go into making a family enterprise work. He's going to help us understand how to make these things effective, and he's going to do all of this as behooves us at MIT Sloan, really taking a systems approach to thinking about these challenges. So Jason will present some ideas, and then we'll move to a Q&A session. So as Lauren said, please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A as we go along. I'll be keeping an eye on those, and we'll come back in a little while and help Jason address your questions and have a great discussion with him. But let's get started, and let me hand over the microphone to Jason, and please take it away.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me, Peter, in this webinar series and for featuring our work on owning impact. This is a project that I've been developing together with my colleague John Davis here at MIT Sloan, who leads the family enterprise executive programs. And as Peter said, I come from the sustainability initiative. What we're going to do today is, this is a webinar style, but I want to make this as interactive as we can. And so I'm going to make a lot of use of polling tools, in particular Poll Everywhere. And the way Poll Everywhere works is that we're going to put a link into the chat. You will click that link and it will open up a web browser tab. You keep that web browser tab open. You could do it on your phone if you like, or you can do it in a separate browser tab on your computer. And the way it works is I will pose a question on the screen. That question will show up on your screen, and when you answer it, your answers will percolate up here onto the screen live. And so this way we can get input from the group pretty quickly in an efficient way across a variety of questions that I'll ask to engage the audience here. So the first question here, just to warm us up, and is kind of maybe a repeat of the one that we just did, which is about what country do you call home? And so this is great. We're getting USA, Ecuador, Trinidad, Tobago, Vietnam, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, South Africa. This is fantastic. I'm going to switch this over to a word cloud view since we've got more than 100 people online, and we can see where folks are coming from. And just as Peter said, always really appreciate the global audiences that come together for our executive programs. And I think it reflects what happens in the classroom as well as what we have here in our webinar. I hear South America, Africa, South Asia, East Asia, Europe. So just fantastic. So what, if we think about all of these different places that we come from in the world, and we step back and we look at our planet, our global civilization right now, the reality is, and this is sort of my perspective coming from the sustainability initiative, is that we have some very big problems to solve, both individually within these countries and across this picture as a global community. My friend Kate Rayworth, who's at Oxford, has done a great job of highlighting what those issues are, and she's created this compass for issues in the 21st century which is shaped like a donut, which I think is a great symbol of a good life. And what she points out is that ideally, in all of these countries that we're all coming from, we would be reaching a basic social foundation, meaning that people would be able to meet their basic needs. Food security, that people would have reliable access to nutrition, just the simple basics of nutrition, that everyone would have access to clean water and improved sanitation, to basic healthcare services, to basic energy services to light your home. But the reality is that we still have a long way to go. There's still people living in extreme poverty. There's still about 800 million people in the world living without reliable access to nutrition, about close to 1 billion that do not have clean, safe drinking water. 3 times that don't have access to improved sanitation. That's this red is this kind of shortfall to a goal of reaching a basic level of standard of living. And at the same time that we're looking to expand access to all of these foundations of modern life, we also are in a moment where we are putting increasing strain on the natural resources and the environment that we depend on to provide us with all of those things. We need a stable climate in order to have the rainfall, to have the water that we need. But what's happened is that we have exceeded that ecological ceiling. We're emitting greenhouse gases faster than the atmosphere can take them up. And so we're destabilizing the climate. We're putting nitrogen and phosphorus out into our waterways much faster than it can be absorbed safely as a result of the way we use fertilizers and other agricultural processes. And that is also compromising water quality and biodiversity. So we have this incredibly challenging moment where we have to simultaneously expand access to this social foundation while reining in or decreasing our impact on the environment in order to live within this kind of donut of a safe, just, and sustainable global civilization. So these are big, urgent, challenging problems to solve. And this is what gets me up in the morning as the head of the sustainability initiative. Now, what I think is really exciting is the possibility that families who own significant assets, who we might look at as almost an adversary in this question of saying, wait, there's some people in the world who have accumulated so much and so much wealth and so much comfort, while there are still people who are struggling to make ends meet. What I think is really interesting is that actually owning families who own significant operating companies and or financial assets also have an outsized role to play in tackling these challenges and in creating opportunities for their businesses and for their families. So let me just show a couple of examples of what I mean. So one is, if we think about access to healthcare in emerging markets, particularly India, there's some incredible health challenges in India. Prior to the COVID pandemic, we were seeing the rapid rise of non-communicable diseases. 38% of deaths up from in 1990 up to 60% of deaths in 2016. So that's increases in heart disease, cancer, and other diseases of what have sometimes been called diseases of affluence, but in a rising emerging market, as well as disparities in access and quality of healthcare. And of course, we've seen this incredibly tragic and challenging tsunami of COVID cases, which sort of swept through the country, reaching as much as 400,000 cases a day. So in the context like this, what is the role for family enterprise? I'll give one example in this context. Dr. Pratap Reddy is the founder of Apollo Hospitals. These are his 4 daughters who are leading major areas of the extended family enterprise. And their mission as a family and as a family enterprise is to bring healthcare of international standards within the reach of every individual and excellence in education, research, and healthcare for the benefit of humanity in India. And they do this through a whole suite of different activities. So Apollo Hospitals is probably what they're best known for. It's a leading hospital chain in India with locations all in every major city, including Calcutta, where my wife's family is from and where I spend a lot of time. But what's interesting about this family is that they have a whole suite of activities that are all aligned around that mission. They have clinics, they do telemedicine, they have CSR initiatives that make sure to reach into more vulnerable populations or populations that don't traditionally access healthcare. They run the hospitals, they have foundations, they're involved in policy development to try to encourage government policies that increase access to healthcare nationally. And they invest in new technologies, cutting edge emerging technologies. They've spent time on the MIT campus to develop digital and health technologies that are relevant in the emerging market where they operate. So I think this is a good example of a family taking all of the different tools at its disposal and going and tackling one of these big global challenges. I'll share another story, which I think is very interesting and informative on this score. So this is a family where there was a young scientist and entrepreneur in the 20th century, leveraged his expertise to join a cutting edge high-tech industry. He joined a leading firm in its marketing department, and he had two key insights about the marketplace. The first, far ahead of its time, this was before Instagram influencers, he realized that people purchase products on the recommendation of trusted friends and advisors. And if he could recruit those trusted advisors into the marketing process and bring their voice into the advertisement, he could more effectively spur people to acquire and enjoy the benefits of the product. And the second insight that he had as an entrepreneur was that an R&D team, a research and development team, rarely anticipates all the ways that customers might use their product. And the variety of market niches that it could fill. And marketing could encourage people to explore new uses for product, identify new opportunities, create value for customers and the firm. And these are two kind of bedrock principles of marketing that were at the foundation of his strategy. He and his two brothers purchased a business of their own that they could grow and involve other family members in. Together, they tackled a critical issue, a challenge faced by a third of the US population, to which the company's R&D had a unique solution. And this marriage of an important problem, a good technology, a brilliant marketing strategy were a super potent combination. And the company took off. The founder's nephew and niece carry his strategic insights forward, leading the new firm, yielding billions in profit and a spot for our hero in his industry's Hall of Fame. And they began essentially a powerful family legacy. And there's a great quote from this founding patriarch to his three sons, where he said, "The most important thing is the good family name. If you lose a fortune, you can always make another. But if you lose your good name, you can never get it back." Now, some of you might be wondering, okay, trying to guess, like, who is this family? Who is Jason talking about? The family that I'm talking about is the Sackler family. The Sackler family invented OxyContin, which is an opioid pain medicine, and it is widely blamed for the growth of opioid prescriptions in the United States that led to an opioid epidemic, killing millions of people and creating incredible economic devastation in communities across the United States. This image on the right is from a protest at the Metropolitan Museum in New York, where the Sacklers, as philanthropists, have gotten involved in all kinds of arts and cultural institutions, put their names on many, many things. And these have become sites of protest for the business that made their core wealth. And they generated their core assets. Recently, there's been a whole suite of lawsuits against the family, against the company. There's a recent quote from a congressperson in the United States. "I'm not sure I'm aware of any family in America that is more evil than yours." So I use this, I was teaching a program in our exec ed courses where I did this kind of reveal, and I literally, I saw 4 people in the room just drop. I can't see your faces, that might be happening to you. I think my point here is to illustrate that oftentimes a family like the Sacklers will look at their social impact efforts very narrowly as the philanthropy that they're doing for cultural institutions, without looking more comprehensively in the way that, for example, I described with the Ready family. So when we think about owning impact, when we think about the impact of families and family enterprise at MIT Sloan, we take this broad perspective, this systems perspective that Peter alluded to. So while we might think about family social impact as one part of the larger suite of activities of an owning family, in fact, we need to understand that impact occurs through all of these different facets: the family company, the non-core businesses, the way that we invest our financial assets, the way that we run our homes and our lifestyles, the talent development of the family, the community activities, all of these things. Impact is not a domain. It's a way of understanding the purpose of the family in society. And as we've seen through these two contrasting examples of Reddy and Sackler, both addressing health, both innovating in their own ways, you have very different outcomes in terms of the reputation of the family, certainly in terms of the unintended consequences of its impact, and in terms of its lasting legacy and unity. As there's now incredible infighting in the Sackler family, as people want to distance themselves from parts of the family that are connected to the opioid epidemic. Now, what I think is, again, very exciting here is the potential for doing this right, for doing this in an integrated, holistic, and systematic way, because family-owned firms have a very significant role to play, again, economically, socially, and environmentally. 60% of firms over $1 billion in emerging economies are family-owned. 37% of the Fortune 500 have very significant family ownership. Family-owned financial and real estate assets are very significant. Globally, there's a rising generation is set to inherit $41 trillion in these assets. The impact investing field, which is the field of capital investment that is trying to make a positive impact while making a return, is largely driven by high net worth families who have invented this field, $715 billion in impact investing field, but that is very small relative to the larger pool of capital investment, where a really interesting aspect of multi-generational families is their long time horizon across asset classes. So in a world where every company complains about its short-term shareholder pressures, the ability to have a long-term view, even a multi-generational view of capital, allows you to have a very different approach to business strategy, to investment strategy, to what's going on in the companies that you own. On the philanthropic side, family foundations are very significant in the philanthropic and nonprofit sector. There's not very good data about philanthropy outside of the United States, but here in the US, we do know that 46% of grant making is from family foundations, with the rest being community foundations and other kind of more institutionalized foundations. So very significant role to play in the whole philanthropic field. And as I point out with the Sackler example, this is a moment when all of this is being brought into the public eye. Activists, politicians, media, families themselves are re-examining the use of all of this power. And in particular, the next generation members of families, 60% consider it important to use their family's wealth to make a positive social or environmental impact. And it's often a really important goal for families to engage that next generation. And having a systematic family social impact strategy is a key way that that can happen. So what we've been doing over the course of the last 2 years is engaging with a group of families to help us design new offerings and new exploration of this family social impact territory, and building on the accumulated expertise that John Davis brings to the table with his 40 years of advising families in 83 countries. And so the question that we've come to ask about our work here is, how might we increase families' impact on the most urgent and important issues of our time, going back to that donut and the critical environmental social issues that we have to tackle. How might we help families unite across generations and branches, given the disunity and lack of alignment that sometimes exists? How can families strengthen reputation in communities that matter to them? And families often ask, how can we engage and develop next-gen family members? Can these impact activities be a forum for doing that kind of talent development? So these are the central questions that families are asking, that we're asking with them, and that we're engaging together through the programming we're doing here at MIT Sloan. So now that I've laid out the territory of what we're talking about here, of family enterprise and family social impact, what I'd like to do is just get a sense about who we have in the room here in our webinar relative to this topic. So I'm moving to the next poll question. So if you keep that URL open on your phone, the question should automatically refresh, and you should see this question. And I'm curious to know, how do you relate to this topic of owning impact? How do you relate to this space of families that own significant companies and or financial assets? Are you a member of a family like this? Are you family office staff in a family office? Are you an advisor or consultant to families? Are you just an executive or employee in a company that happens to be family owned, and so you're observing those dynamics as a manager? Perhaps you're providing impact investment services or ESG investment services where you're trying to reach in this kind of an audience, or perhaps just more general asset management or wealth management work that touches on these families. Or maybe you're in another category entirely and you're just, have some other curiosity about the space. If you are typing other in the poll here, I'd love to see what that is in the chat if you'd be willing to share. But let me show the responses so we can see what we've got here. Okay, great. So about a third of you are, a little more, are third to almost half of you are in some way either a family member or family office staff, captures about half of you. So that's great. So I'm glad we were able to reach that audience. 26% of you are in this other category. And if you do, I'd love to hear, you can just, put in the chat if you're willing to share what some of those other reasons why you found your way to this webinar, things that caught your imagination about this topic. But this is super helpful. So now I know when I'm addressing members of these families, we have a good chunk of them here in the room in our webinar group. So what we are doing with families is that we're doing this through a variety of mechanisms, including a direct advisory outside of MIT, but then inside MIT, a series of programs. We've done a series of pilot programs with 20 odd families at this point. And we're also engaging with individual family members through mechanisms at MIT, like our Visiting Fellows program, and I'll talk more about that later. Our approach is to recognize that this is a journey. To answer these questions, to develop alignment and efficacy, to develop a comprehensive family social impact strategy is a journey. And that journey we depict with this picture, which is that, and what we have here is past, future, visible outcomes, and underlying energy. And we take people through this kind of U-shaped process. Those of you who are familiar with my colleague Otto Scharmer's work on Theory U, this is a deliberate sort of homage to that concept. And what we do is we invite families first to inventory and understand what have been the key activities and outcomes that your family has undertaken from an impact perspective. Some of these might be deliberate efforts to have a positive impact, like philanthropic foundation or impact investing. Some of them might be things that have unintended negative consequences that you're looking to mitigate. So we've worked with a number of oil and gas families who are confronting the legacy of climate impact and the future of climate impact and saying, okay, how can we deal with this challenge and the need to transition to lower carbon energy sources. We then go beneath the surface to the underlying narrative. What are the stories that we tell about our families to illustrate our values, our purpose, who we are in the world, and how can we use our fundamental values and purpose as a way to ground the development of new strategy going into the future. And then from that place of really understanding where we've been, then we can start to articulate a new sense of possibility for the family, a new narrative for the family about where we're going, how we're going to create a positive impact, the kind of legacy we're going to leave in society, the way we might deal with any current or past harms that we've caused intentionally or unintentionally, and then getting into action with putting those strategies into place. What we're going to do on the webinar today is just showcase a little bit about what goes on in this inventorying piece of the puzzle, because it also gives a little window into the way that we think about this systems approach to family social impact. So the way we think about inventory is that there are a few questions that we ask. How does your family manage its efforts? Who is engaged in social impact efforts in the family? Who are kind of the champions? Who's sitting on the sidelines? What are the issues and channels that you're passionate about? The issues being those big social environmental issues in the context that you care about, the channels being the ways that you go about taking action. And then at the center, why is this important to you? Again, coming back to this notion of values and purpose. So when we do, I'll explore these. First we'll look at the what, and then we'll look at the who and the how for today's exploration. So on the what side, the question is, what social or environmental issues are you and your family active and interested in? We can use that donut that I showed earlier. What we found that families find useful is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is a set of goals that have been laid out by a big consensus process across all the nations of the world, trying to lay out what is humanity's. Jeffrey Sachs at Columbia is fond of saying that this is the closest thing that the planet has to a strategy. So this is, how are we going to alleviate poverty and end hunger, provide good health, healthcare and well-being, education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation. And you'll see that it has the environmental goals like climate action, life below water and life on land and water, as well as social equity goals and just fundamental economic development goals, providing decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation, infrastructure. So what we find is that oftentimes pretty much any impact activity that families are undertaking can fit into one of these 17 goals. And whether it's through, again, the variety of different channels that they might use. And again, there's not always alignment. So sometimes you might have a next generation group of people in a family who are very passionate about climate action, or very passionate about inequality and social justice issues, while there are senior members of the family who might see their impact as really being about driving economic growth, particularly in an emerging market where you cannot always take that for granted, or who've invested in education. They're putting their philanthropy into educational institutions that they themselves came up through. We certainly see that here at MIT. So this is a first kind of exercise that we'll ask people to do, and I'll just pose this question to you. So the next poll, this is a tappable image poll. So the way this works is that each person is allowed to tap, each of you is allowed to tap on 3 things. And as you tap, the little pins will start to appear on this map. So I'm curious, which issues are a focus for the family or families that you work with? Excellent. So we're seeing these pins come in. And we see a high concentration here around quality education. And this is something that we see quite a bit. Oftentimes families value education. The entrepreneur or others felt like they came up as a result of the education that they got. They want to pay it forward and pass that on. They also, many operating companies are immersed within a particular surrounding community. You get to know the workforce. You want to make sure that their kids are having good quality educational opportunities as well. So there's often a local dimension to quality education kinds of investments. Similarly with clean water and sanitation, kind of local infrastructure. Many involved in poverty alleviation. And as you see, quite a few here on climate action. And even 5 years ago, we would not have seen as much concentration on climate action as an area of focus for families. Now there are whole networks. I've done climate workshops with a couple of major networks of families that are investing around environmental themes, particularly climate. And we're seeing that as a really important growth area, including in families where the wealth has been generated through carbon intensive businesses like fossil fuels and steel and cement and forestry. So this is really interesting to see, and hopefully gets you reflecting a bit about what the possibilities are for the families where you are connected. And then the second part of the what question is, what channels does your family use in order to have impacts on these different dimensions? And what as we've been studying family social impact activities, what we've learned is that there's an incredible variety of mechanisms and channels that families can use to make a positive impact. And so we break these up here in this picture with in two ways. On the rows here, these are essentially mechanisms for impact. So operations means I'm improving the operations of our company, of the way that we run our households, of the way that we run our foundations or other organizations that we build. And the way that we run things embodies a commitment to socioeconomic and environmental sustainability and impact. So for example, John's there. So for example, we can think about the operations of our own family and having a home which is net zero energy because it's well insulated and air sealed and running on solar energy and has its own water, water gathering and so on. And so that becomes a demonstration and a commitment for us to be to show that we are concerned about climate and to sometimes road test some of the technologies that we might be investing in. But obviously operations of our company, the way that we run our companies themselves might be really essential. So if we're running a agricultural business, this is an example from another family. If we're running a farm in the southern part of the United States, a big farm with lots of workers, how can we do that in a way that has some sense of racial justice, especially given the history in that part of the country, and trying to do regenerative production, meaning ways of farming that return organic material to the soil, that maintain water in the soil and allow us to operate with less and less inputs. So, but even a foundation, we can think about the operational aspects of running the foundation with diversity, inclusive governance. These are all different ways that just the way that we run things can be a way that we have impact. Capital investment is a second mechanism for having an impact. All investing is impact investing. All capital has some kind of impact in the world. The question is, how deliberate are we being about that? And so sometimes people will carve out a body of investments that are called impact first investments, meaning that we're trying to achieve a modest return on this over a long time horizon, or we're taking some serious risks, but we're doing it because we want to have an impact. There may be another tranche of money where we're trying to achieve market rate returns, but we are being active owners. So we're owning public equities, but we're voting our shares, we're engaging in shareholder action campaigns, ways that we can try to change what's going on in the firms that we own. There's a variety of mechanisms where capital investment can be an avenue toward this kind of impact. And again, that can occur across a variety of different elements of the larger family enterprise. So it can happen through a family office, which may be a structured investment company that's been created by the family to conduct these types of activities. There may be a family foundation that has an endowment, and the endowment of that investment is used to invest in ways that are program related or mission related. So that's what's going on here, is a family foundation that is able to do impact first investments with its endowment. And then of course, individuals or particular branches of families may be dabbling and experimenting with different aspects of impact investment. The third category is philanthropy. The third mechanism here is philanthropy. So giving away money, giving away time, engaging in board seats, as well as volunteer time inside organizations, and giving money in the form of gifts and grants. This is often done as on an individual basis, but many families might have a family foundation that's been set up to be able to pool more assets across the family and to have something that everybody can feel a sense of being invested in. It's very interesting. When I first came into this space, I had examples like the Reddy family developing Apollo hospitals in my mind, where there was one single unifying mission, and there's a whole suite of activities that are all coordinated around that common mission of driving healthcare in India, with Apollo hospitals as kind of a key, in a kind of marquee spot. The reality is that in many families, that's not how it works. In many families, you have a family enterprise, a company that many are involved in. It could be something in the food or beverage distribution or in construction. Everybody's sort of already involved in that family company. And so when they check out at the end of the day and they think about, being involved in their community, being involved philanthropically, that's exactly the moment where they don't want to be heavily involved with their family, where they want to do something that's their own, that they feel their own imprint on, their own name is on, in a sense. And so sometimes that philanthropy becomes a mechanism for people to express their individuality in the context of a larger family, even if at the same time there are family foundations. So this is why it's very useful often to inventory the full suite of activities. And then the final mechanism here is political involvement. And political activism and involvement can have many different forms. It can look like getting out in the streets and protesting, which is the taste of some families. It can look like more behind the scenes political donations, advocacy, lobbying. But this is another key place, particularly when the problems we need to solve require some kind of systemic change to solve them. New policies to price pollution and so on. So sometimes families see this as an integral part of a family social impact strategy. The color coding here is another layer on top of this that we explore sometimes, because with families, which is the yellow means where are you getting engagement? And the reason we ask that question is sometimes the reason a family has created an activity isn't just because they want to maximize their impact or get a return on investment, but it's because they want to create a place to play for that next generation member who is looking to build their skills. So that you want to train someone up to be an investor. They need to learn basic due diligence skills. Well, one of the ways you can do that is actually by putting them on a line of philanthropy so they can diligence nonprofits, understand their management teams, a lot of the same skills you can develop there, and then translate those into other arenas of investment in the larger family enterprise. So where do these activities provide engagement for people in the family? That's a critical question, as well as where does it allow us to maximize our impact in the larger society? I'm very curious to know from you, for those of you who are here on the webinar today, what of these channels are you interested in exploring further? Which of these pique your curiosity that you think could be useful for the families that you're part of or that you're connected to as an advisor or manager or in some other capacity? And this is another tappable poll, which should refresh on your browser. Okay, so a few of these on here, probably the highest density we have is over here on family business enterprise initiatives and the operations. And this is great. I mean, this is, in terms of my day job here at MIT Sloan, strategies for sustainable business, other programs that we do here at MIT, this is our bread and butter. It's about how do we run companies in ways that positively impact people and the environment through their factory management, through their supply chains, through their farms, through their employment practices. And all of those are really critical. Again, remembering the Sackler example, where thinking that they could sort of paper over the legacy of the family through philanthropic activities, but ignore kind of the core impacts of the family enterprise, didn't turn out to be a good bet. And then there's also some interest in this idea of individuals and branch initiative operations, sort of thinking about lifestyle, thinking about houses, thinking about travel, and so on, can be a really interesting way to get your feet wet in these terrains. So great to see the level of interest across the board here. And this is very helpful for us to know what our larger community is curious to learn more about. Okay, now I want to wrap up soon here, but I'll just do one more piece here, which is what I just hinted at with this picture and the color coding, is that the who part of our inventory, this question about who is really involved in the family social impact activities, turns out to be a really critical question, given the goals of next generation engagement, cross-branch engagement, and so on. So we do a very simple exercise with our participants, which is about who in your family is engaged in social impact efforts. Who would you categorize in kind of a passive or observer bucket? Who are the people who are really actively engaged, but more who are engaged, but in a sort of cheering on from the sidelines, maybe taking a look at an investment memo or showing up at an advisory meeting once in a while? And then who are the really active members who are driving the show and who are leading the effort, or the champions in a sense? This can be a very useful question to ask, to just notice who is in which of these buckets. As the inquiry deepens and evolves, what we do is that we take this simple picture, which is a kind of stock and flow of people from one category to the next, and we look more broadly at this as a systems process. So if there are flows of people from this kind of passive or observer status to this more engaged status to this kind of more active status, what are the things that really drive that family engagement? How is it that when we get more actions and more things going on, we have more stories to tell, and that can engage more people and create kind of some of these feedback loops? Or how can we, for example, accumulate knowledge through doing these actions, knowledge that can help us be more effective, increase the efficacy of that activity, and drive our social impact over time? I talked about reputation earlier. How can those stories being told externally start to drive family reputation in ways that can actually benefit the family from a business perspective, by lowering transaction costs, bringing other trusted partners to the table, and helping to support larger goals for the family? So we take this more complex systems approach, which I don't want to overwhelm you with right now, but just to say, we start that question with just this simple core of this, which is, who are the people that are currently really actively engaged in your context, in your families? Who would you like to see more actively engaged? And so that's the that's the poll that I'll put into the room now, which is, if you could get some people more actively involved in family social impact strategy in the contexts where you operate, whom would you want to engage further? And you don't name names here, but it could be, you know, a particular category of people in a generation or in a different branch. Maybe it's a question of the family members are really excited about doing impact activities, but the family office staff or other professionals or advisors that they've hired are not providing the level of support and guidance for that you might hope for. Let me just cluster these so it'll be a little easier to see. Rising generation who are college age, next gen, spouse, siblings, the shareholder group, the older generation founders who might not see this as being kind of central to how they built the business. They were focused on just building the business. So how can we get them involved in the social impact conversation? In other cases, we see the rising generation, the college age, next gens. Are there ways that they can start to understand themselves to be part of something important, something meaningful, something valuable in society through the work that that happens in the family social impact work? I'm just making these a little smaller so that we can see more of them on the screen at once. So I think what's really interesting to notice about this picture that we have on the screen here is that there are every category here, right? Every family is different in terms of the pattern of the history of how people have engaged on these impact topics, what their broader goals are in terms of engagement and unity and alignment, and the opportunities that might exist to use owning impact as a mechanism for achieving these types of engagement objectives. So that really brings us to the final piece of our puzzle here. So we talked about the what, we talked about the who, and the last part is the how, which is about how families really tactically move forward on this agenda of engaging people, refining strategy, and governing these activities in a more systematic way. And again, building on the experience that John Davis and his firm, Cambridge Family Enterprise Group, and his research institute, the Cambridge Family Enterprise Institute, have developed, as well as our observations in the programs here at MIT. This is kind of the evolutionary process that we're starting to see families go through and that we're looking to support and steward. So from a strategy perspective, oftentimes when we encounter families, there's a variety of ad hoc efforts by individual champions to improve family impact and reputation, and maybe even someone who sort of designated themselves as sort of an impact czar or chair, but they haven't really created a conversation in the whole family. So going from that to sort of an advanced team of family members who are inquiring into the why, the who, the what, the how, moving that forward, and then going to some kind of really exciting and well-structured impact advisory team that can iterate on strategic priorities and simple rules to choose which activities to get involved in that can inform the boards and the investment committees of the family. And that strategy process can have engagement of people as an objective. So initially, you might have the conversation just being driven by a senior gen member of the family who has a legacy set of donations they'd like to give. So moving from that to being able to engage the next generation and really do intergenerational learning and strategizing. And then there's an even more advanced level beyond that, which is that the best practices in philanthropy and impact investing and in corporate sustainability all involve a more permeable boundary to these institutions, so that you actually have voices from the communities who are being affected and who are being supported, having a seat at the table to help inform the philanthropy of the impact investing so that it can be more impactful and more sustainable. And then on governance, oftentimes people will come in with individual activities that have been pushed through or enabled kind of in the cracks between the different committees that might exist. And gradually, as families evolve on this, they start to channel those activities through the board or family council so that they can have some monitoring and oversight. And then eventually impact becomes a perspective that's embedded into the key governance structures of the family, from the family office to the family foundation to the company boards themselves. What we're trying to do at MIT is create a suite of programming that can support families through this journey. Again, through that initial journey of inventorying and then developing a new narrative for the family, and also building some of these architectures that allow them to have a sustained, coherent, and effective approach to impact. The two mechanisms that we are playing with right now, one is the Visiting Fellows Program, which is organized through the International Programs Office, where we can have an individual member of a family come and spend a semester here at MIT, self-structured in a sense, with some advising by myself or John Davis, as they go to develop their family social impact strategy or incubate it or propel it further. So it's kind of more of a mentoring style. And then the Owning Impact program is an executive style program where families come as teams. So we might have 10 families, each family is bringing 3 to 4 people from the family. And then you get the chance to have dialogues and learning within the families as you work through the kind of frameworks that I've shown, as well as learning across the families as you compare notes and are able to build off of the wisdom from really a globally assembled group of people. So we're very excited about this as a piece of our larger family enterprise suite of programming and as a piece of our larger sustainability focused set of programming targeting this context of family enterprise. So that's the kind of overview of what we're doing. Hopefully some of these tools and perspectives have been useful for you, and I'm happy to now go into looking at some of the Q&A that has popped up as we've been going here, or other comments that you may have.
Great, thank you, Jason. I think you've been covering a lot of the kinds of questions that people have as you went along. Thank you for such a thoughtful presentation in that sense. One set of questions which I think seems to be on people's minds, they're perhaps broader than just the issue of or the important issue of owning impact, but relate to the challenges that many family enterprises have, and they seem to fall into sort of the internal challenges and the external challenges. On the internal front,
yes,
what do you see happening from the point of view of, you talked a little bit about this, but creating unity around these important topics within families, but also where there is inevitably disunity and very divergent viewpoints about these kinds of important topics,
yes,
as well as other aspects of how the enterprise runs. And then the external perspective, just to add that in, is what are you seeing, or kind of the external interventions that are challenging families that are trying to be active in this space? And
yes,
what are some of the strategies that they're employing to address that?
yes. So okay, so first of all, and when we say we want to take a systems perspective, the way that we think about that systems perspective is that it has these two facets. There's the internal system of thinking about the family as a system and saying there's the family enterprise as a system. And there's a whole set of different activities that are all interacting with each other and potentially supporting each other, but sometimes working in conflict with each other. Or we can think about the family as a system, as I was depicting it more with this kind of system dynamics picture, where you have a dynamic process of getting people engaged, building knowledge, building wealth, building reputation. Maybe those things are coming and going. And so that's one aspect of this systems approach, is to say, how do these things, how does the family operate as a system? And in this question about unity, in alignment is really essential. How might we unite the family across generations and branches? I mean, for some families, that feels like a completely insurmountable challenge. And in fact, it may be better off to sort of start with a place where you can work. What we've been hearing from families is that family social impact is a essential domain for fostering unity and alignment, because it is the space in which you can really inquire into a shared purpose, a shared set of values about who we are as people, who we are in society, a vision for the kind of communities and society that we want to help create, and a sense of purpose of people understand what we're doing here, where people understand why we are running this enterprise, why we're doing this work. And this is a very much kind of next gen video game metaphor, but one next gen said to me, impact is the cheat code to family unity. A cheat code is in a video game something that you can type in and skip ahead from level 1 to level 10. And what he meant by that was that these inquiries into who we are in society and what we're trying to do together can actually be a really important source of unity that steps out of the context of the normal conflicts that happen inside a business. That said, of course, there are conflicts that arise because of these social environmental topics. So if we look at, if we look at the even if we look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, for example, I mean, these have been created in a sense to be collaborative and to be, apolitical. But of course, so many of these things are politicized, from inequality. Some people see that word and they think socialism, and it creates a whole suite of reactions and ideological divisions. Some people look at climate action in countries where we have some political polarization around climate change, like the United States and Australia. And it seems like, wait, we can't go there to work on climate change because we're going to have, climate deniers and climate alarmists, and it's going to be a mess. So we have to be able to have those conversations effectively. And to be honest, personally, this is a big reason why I got into this terrain. I grew up in a family enterprise, so I have a personal connection to the topic. And I wrote a book called Breaking Through Gridlock, The Power of Conversation in a Polarized World. And I think this is a really exciting place to bring that tool set to help people have higher quality conversations inside the family as they go to wrestle with their own internal challenges and the way that the larger political polarization and conflict gets mapped into the family dynamic, which is very, very challenging, but it's exactly what Gabriel Grant and I were taking on with that book.
Great, thank you, Jason. We always like to talk about problem definitions, and I think that was a really fantastic and comprehensive definition of the problem space in the answer to that question. And we're also just about out of time. We could go on for another hour, I'm sure. So thank you so much, Jason, for joining us. You do have an upcoming course that we're helping you put together on owning impact, creating a positive legacy for families and society. Keep an eye out for the dates upcoming for that if you'd like to really get further into these tools and work with Jason and others here at MIT on really creating impact for yourselves and for your families, and in particular for the world. That's why we're here at MIT. Thank you all for joining us at MIT in this webinar. We hope we'll see many of you engaging with us, if we haven't already, in this important journey, as Jason described it. And another way that you can do that is to join us in our next webinar, which will be about becoming a digital master. And I think, Jason, I'm sure you would agree with me that every single family enterprise is also grappling with this incredible
digital transformation. Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully this will be meaningful to many of you. So thank you all for joining us from around the world. Thank you, Jason, for this fascinating and for me, certainly very provocative explanation and description of your work. We'll look forward to continuing to both engage and have impact with all the people on the webinar today, all the people who may watch the recording of it, and we hope many more members of your extended family, enterprises, and the businesses that they engage with. Thank you all. It's been a great pleasure to have you with us, Jason, and we'll look forward to seeing more of this important work unfold.
Thanks for having me, Peter.